Hi again then guys, and welcome to another specific car review from the world of Forza 7, and this time we're looking at a car which was a relatively recent DLC addition to the game. It's a little bit older now, but not by much, and it's a car which, for most players, would probably not get the blood boiling that much. You might have used it once or twice and maybe thought it's okay, perhaps you might have fallen in love with it instantly, as I know some have. Some of you guys, even here on the channel, have mentioned that you really do like this car. Now, for me personally, when I first saw this one added to the game, I thought it was pretty cool, but my thoughts on it were kind of similar to them adding stuff like the Volvo SUV or the new Lincoln Continental. Not that it's bad, but it's just not my go-to vehicle of the particular download pack. Now, the thing about Kia for me is that they're one of those brands which have consistently earned my respect over recent years, and to me the first time that I really noticed them was with the Kia Forte in the Forza franchise as well, back in Forza 4, because that was a car that I didn't really use much, but then when I actually looked at the car, tuned it up a little bit, started driving it, I realised that I actually really love that car, the Forte Coupe SX. It's a small front-wheel drive coupe with a modest amount of power, almost like Kia's modern-day equivalent to, say, a DC2 Honda Integra. In some ways, similar kind of power, similar kind of performance, not necessarily quite as respected a driving machine, of course, but an interesting alternative. Now, Hyundai is another company who do great examples of vehicles like that. You've got stuff like the Hyundai Genesis, which has very, very steadily made a name for itself over the years as a great rival to stuff like, initially, the Nissan Fairlady Z, and later on also sports sedans as well. Now with Kia, they didn't necessarily make a stronger name as quickly as Hyundai did in the performance field, because most of Kia's models still remained relatively understated, affordable daily drivers. So this one is much more of a step away from the norm for them. Now it's a car which visually, to me, is great. I love the look of the car. It does look a little bit like this and that from different angles. The back end kind of reminds me of the new Alpine, and the front end, especially the intakes on the sides of the bumper, remind me a lot of the latest BMW M6. But at the same time, even though it does have certain cues from other cars, the way that it puts them together and also combines them with Kia's own signature style, such as with the grille at the front, which is a little bit BMW-esque, but is still very clearly a Kia, I think they've done a good job of putting all of that together. But in terms of performance, well, that is of course what could make or break the car, because you've got a 3.3 litre engine, 8-speed gearbox, rear-wheel drive, and in the real world, as well as in the game, although it's not as important in the game, it's a lot cheaper than what you'd expect its rivals to be. Now, I will say that one thing that you need to know about the Kia Stinger when you go into buying the car or driving the car in a game is that it doesn't have as much power as the kind of cars which you might expect to take it up against. Because you're probably thinking, based on the size of the car, the sound of it, the look of it, that it's something like a rival, for instance, for the BMW M5, perhaps. And although under certain circumstances you could take it up against that, that's not really where it falls. This is a 365 horsepower car, so it's a whole lot for a Kia. That's a great rival as well to Hyundai, once again, but not exactly BMW M5 level, even though I would say it looks about as sporty as something like that. Now, 365 horsepower isn't quite as strong as some others in its kind of size and category, but it's more about what it can do with that power, and also the torque. It has even more torque than power at 376 pound-feet, and given that the weight in the game is, well, quite a bit lighter actually than it's quoted as being in real life, which is 1.9 tonnes, in the game it's 1.7, 1701 kilos, well, that makes a difference if that is the case, and there is that huge disparity between the game and real life. 1700 kilos is still quite a bit, but that's kind of the norm, again, for a sports or even super saloon. So what can it actually do in practice? Well, that is where Kia, Hyundai, I would say Skoda as well, although they're not in many games, that's where they set themselves apart. Because although they don't have the sheer numbers of many of their rivals, the power, the torque, certainly not the pricing, what they can do with what they have to work with is actually pretty great. For a start, this car is a lot of fun, and to me, regardless of how good it is for racing, because let's face it, most players aren't going to use this to race with that often. Some will, but most won't. So for those kind of players, the fun factor could almost be a more important thing, because you're not going to choose this over an M5, or at least, as I said, most people won't. Even if it is better than one, they just won't give it that chance. Whereas if it's more fun, or at least as fun, that could tempt players away. And of course in the real life that applies as well, but in particular we're just talking about the game. Now, when you drive the car, you don't notice as much the lack of power. All you notice is how drift happy it is, how easy it is to put the power and torque down, and how light it is on its feet. Because although it's definitely a heavy car, it's a big car, I would say it doesn't feel like a 1700 kilo car. It feels more like a, say, 1550 kilo car, which is pretty good. And the fact that it is rear-wheel drive, although all-wheel drive would have been an interesting alternative, certainly would have made it quicker off the line, but it's an interesting approach to the car. Having it be rear-wheel drive, that's a much more pure, raw, old-school sports or super saloon approach, and I kind of like that they did that, actually, instead of all-wheel drive, because it certainly makes it more tail-happy. It feels like more of a pure driver's car. In a funny kind of way, it actually does feel kind of like a BMW in terms of the way it drives. And to be fair, that's pretty high praise for a Kia or a Hyundai or any of those less obvious brands who are trying to dip their toe into the market and take on these seriously well-established models from very well-established and well-respected, and for good reason, rivals. I think that the Stinger does an excellent job of rivaling those cars, but at the same time I do feel that for many players this is kind of, unfortunately for Kia, going to be one of those occasions where the car is more appealing in real life than it is in a game. Because at the end of the day, although certain players of us, such as myself and some of you guys, do enjoy giving a chance to companies like Kia, Hyundai, Skoda, Saab, the less obvious choices, the vast majority of players just don't care. So in the game, the car will definitely not get the credit that it's due, even though some of us do really like the car. So I would actually urge you to give the Stinger a try. Of course, if you download the DLC, you get it for free anyway, but even if you did have to buy it, 46 grand is dirt cheap, and it's definitely worth a look, if for nothing else than the fun factor. It looks great, it sounds great, it's fun, and it's a great drift basis. When you tune it up, it gets even better, and considering that the category is only C anyway, at 493 PI, it's got quite a lot of usability as well. But that's it for this pick overall. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.